I don't know what's going on with Carolina. That comes to my second question, by the way. We are talking to BetSperts Sports betting manager Ryan Noonan. What's going on with the Carolina Panthers? You make a trade for Sam Darnold with the Jets. You gave up a second and a fourth in this year's draft. The Jets absolutely won on that because they get Jermaine Johnson, and they did what they did. And then you decide this offseason, hey, Baker's available. They were drafted in the same draft at 1 and 3. Maybe we'll bring Baker in, and we'll have them play against one another and try to see who wins the job. Makes a lot of sense. But Baker Mayfield, only for a 5th-round draft pick, goes over there to the Carolina Panthers. What is the Carolina Panthers doing? I don't understand.
Well, we saw enough to know that Sam Darnold isn't it, right? And in this league, for all you want to talk about, like all the other things matter. They do matter. But if you don't have the quarterback, none of it really matters. So you have to continue to go out and take shots. Like you go out and try to see if you're going to have Matt Corral in the draft and see if maybe he's going to be a thing. And maybe they give him a chance again, but Baker too, like I feel like Baker was injured last year. I don't think he is obviously what we thought he might've been in a really small sample in his rookie year. But again, from the Carolina standpoint, it's like, hey, we know Sam's not it. Let's take some other shots at the board. If not, we're being in a position to take another shot next year in the draft, whatever we have to do. So again, they have weapons, right? The offensive line they poured some resources into, having, DJ Moore as a playmaker. I was a big Terrence Marshall guy coming out of LSU. He kind of stubbed his toe from the start last year. Hopefully he can get some footing. Robbie Anderson, I mean, again, part of that is I think quarterback play. A lot of that, starts to look bad. The most just empty air yards that you could ever think about.
How about just shutting your damn mouth? How about that? Robbie Anderson just shutting his mouth and playing the game.
Never been his thing. Ask the local police officers in New Jersey if he's into shutting his mouth.
I know all about that. Trust me.
Not his thing. So, when you look at it from like an EPA standpoint, I mean, Sam Darnold was just awful last year. 30 out of 31 qualifying quarterbacks. It was just, negative from a success rate standpoint, negative from an EPA per dropback standpoint, just below average across the board. So you have to go ahead and take shots. Baker, as bad as he was last year, was better than Sam Darnold.
Oh, yes.
And if part of that was health and there's a little bit more left for Baker to prove, I think it's still not going to be enough to make a dent in that division, but I understand why they make the move.
Shameful. Absolutely shameful for what the Browns fans did to that man. I am so disgusted, and I have a lot of respect for the Brown fans. The Cleveland Brown fans are the best. It's one of the best in football. But to push this guy out after him being drafted by your team, really being the savior, was one game away from going to the AFC title game because of a trick play by Kansas City, and he was one of the main reasons why they got there, and then just give up on him after the year after getting hurt, playing with a hurt shoulder, playing with the pain and the abuse that he got from the fans, and then attacking his wife on social media. Disgusting. They've got a lot of thinking to do, because they got a guy right now in Deshaun Watson that needs to stay on the field if he doesn't get suspended for the whole season with a couple of hand me friends over there in the back room, if you know what I mean.
Even when the Browns are talented, they still find a way to screw it up. So my question is,
picture me rolling on that one.
Yeah. So my question is, being you're a betting guy, the division winner bets that we've seen a lot of this season, a lot of close ones so far. We were talking about the AFC East earlier. Is there anyone that you see good value in from a betting standpoint to bet at the start of the season?
We actually, on a Move the Line, did the NFC North last night, and I think the Vikings are an interesting team. I think that there are some questions, right? We like to do the transitive property of coaching often, where we see Kevin O'Connell has been hanging out with Sean McVay for years, so we think there's some strong correlation between bringing over the Sean McVay offense. And we do see it oftentimes, right? We see the pedigree and where you came from a coaching tree standpoint, that some of that stuff leaks over. But really, when you're moving from an archaic offensive system that Mike Zimmer had, and basically allowing his former, coaches to hire their sons to run your offense, and you run this very conservative, run the football, very predictive offense, and when you start to look at what you can get when you start to go 3 receivers and you start to be more aggressive, when you look at what the Vikings had last year, a ton of injuries, both sides of the football. Offensive line was a mess, but they ran more 2-back sets than anyone in the league. Very, very old school. And they also, you would think, despite that, they also led the league in stuff rate, meaning the Dalvin Cook, whoever was in there, depending, they got tackled at the line or behind the line more than any other team. You would hope the fullback would help protect that. You're essentially adding another offensive lineman. They still led the league in stuff rate because you're very predictable. Now you're going to see the Rams had 3 receivers out there 87% of the time. They run a lot of 11 formation. You're going to see, I think, a spike in that with what the Vikings can do with Justin Jefferson. I think Adam Thielen has a little bit more meat on the bone. I think hopefully we can get a healthy Irv Smith season, already dealing with a thumb injury. But on the defensive side, they made some splashes too. They added some guys in the secondary in the draft that I think can come in and start day one. Zadarius Smith comes over from the Packers. If Danielle Hunter can stay healthy too, now you have some bookend edge rushers that can kind of hide some of the stuff that happens in the back end, which I do think will be better. So 3-1 for them to win that division. They are plus 105 on Caesars to make the playoffs. So maybe, a hedge thinking that the Packers can still be okay. But the Packers have a lot of questions. Now, again, they're still the Packers. They can be conservative and find a way to do it. But, I do think that there's a lot of hype around the Lions and the Bears. I still don't think those are very good football teams. So they got a couple wins in the division. And the schedule works out pretty nice for them as well. So the Vikings, I think, are an interesting look.
As everybody knows, we are talking to BetSperts sports betting manager Ryan Noonan. Russell Wilson, the Denver Broncos. He heads over there, new team, new offense, new wide receivers, lot more weapons. Where do you see this Broncos team? Obviously, we know what the defense is going to be. I think they're going to be very explosive. I think they're going to be one of the better defenses in all of the NFL. Even losing a couple of defensive pieces in the offseason, they're still young and fun to watch. Where does this offense turn now with a quarterback that actually can throw the ball?
This is another example of the transitive property of coaching where we have Nathaniel Hackett coming over from Green Bay, right? So we're trying to think of what does that look like in terms of offensive play systems based off of what we've had in the past, both of what Russ had in the past and then what Denver had in the past from a playmaking standpoint. So last year, even though Green Bay plays very slowly, Green Bay was 4th in pass rate over expectation. I'm hoping that translates. We haven't seen Russ anywhere near even league average from a pass rate over expectation standpoint because we know they wanted to run the football so much. Very old school mentality up there in the Pacific Northwest. So again, continued, even though last year dealing with the injury, he still led the league just short of 10 yards, 9.9 air yards per attempt. So it's very easy to be excited about this offense, right? We have Cortland Sutton, even though we lost him, Patrick, Jerry Jeudy is, again, we've had very small bursts of Jerry Jeudy, but all those things are still there. When you look at separation, he led the league in separation at the point of throw last year. So like that guy gets, especially against man, he's going to get open. We haven't seen him. He's dealt with way more Drew Lock than anyone needs to, and obviously a little bit of Teddy Bridgewater last year. So, right. And then we even had like Kendall Hinton getting game starts.
Yeah, the receiver.
All the stuff yeah, right. So I think massive upgrades. If KJ Hamler can come in, Albert O is a big old pass catching tight end. Like there's a lot to like here. I think the offensive line is going to even be better than what he played with in Seattle too, right? So like everything is kind of an upgrade. I think he's going to be in some more advantageous game scripts because I like the defense here. So, yeah, I mean, Denver, it's hard not to be really excited about Russ, who I think moves to a new spot and gets himself a shot to get back to that playoffs. That division is fun.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of receivers moving in the offseason too. Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, A.J. Brown all traded in the offseason. So from a fantasy perspective now, going with those three in new locations, different offenses, where are your expectations for them at their rankings?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm a little down on Tyreek, again, in relation to where he's been in the past. But, are you guys Tyreek guys?
I'm not this year. I'm more on Waddle this year.
I just love what Tyreek said on his podcast, thinking that Tua is going to be more accurate than Patrick Mahomes. I don't care what he's trying to sell. You're not selling any idiots that answer, okay? Give me a
strong
break.
Endorsement, but yes. That's pretty dicey for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Like, I think he still could be okay, but again, from a fantasy standpoint, it's really about opportunity cost and what's going on around him. So at that point of the draft, often we're able to see, the Saquon Barkleys of the world, Aaron Jones, who we just talked about. I think Aaron Jones is going to have to step into a pretty massive pass catching role with that team. And we've seen that happen in small samples with Devontae Adams out. I think Devontae walks into a pretty nice system. Again, new quarterback he's familiar with, but also like, as a Patriots fan, pretty bullish on what Josh McDaniels has been able to do at times and how he's malleable based on the talent that he has. And I think he's smart enough to be able to go, hey, this is a difference maker that I haven't had before. and we have some others on the team that can make some plays, but let's make sure we're focusing on getting the ball to Devontae Adams. So I'm more bullish on him than probably the others. Obviously it's hard to argue with the talent of an A.J. Brown, but there are some interesting things that make me a little nervous because Philly was pretty fearful to call anything over the middle. When you look at what happened last year, they were very conservative in throwing the ball over the field or over the middle of the field. They actually, by far, I believe 12% fewer passes to the middle of the field than league average.
Wow.
And that's where 65% of A.J. Brown's targets came last year. Runs a lot of drags, a lot of slants and soft stuff. Now, do they scheme stuff differently? And you think too, like what they had last year to throw to was a lot of like tight ends. We had Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert for a little bit. Goddard's running up the seams over the middle a lot, and that's kind of why he took a hit in fantasy too. So I get that from a quarterback standpoint when you think there's a lot of stuff going on over the middle of the field. And when I have maybe a limited passer in pocket, it makes it easier for me to be like, okay, your first and second look are to the left. And if you don't have it, then you probably break down and scramble a little bit. He's probably not getting to the point where he's progressing all the way across the fields, even to get to the middle. So I'm interested to see what they do from a schematic standpoint with A.J. Brown. The talent's through the roof. Obviously, that entire roster is exciting. But yeah, I'm a little down on A.J. Brown at cost in fantasy too.